I'm going to start speaking now so we can give our two guest speakers as much time as we can. Welcome. I'm glad you guys are with us today. Just a housekeeping thing before we get started. You'll notice our clock up above is a little off. Believe it or not, the minute hand is accurate, so you guys will get a sense as to when we have to transition. All right, so 8th graders, we can trust you guys to kind of know the routine, but your routine changes just a little bit today. So 8P1 and 8M, you guys are going to go at 12:15 directly to period 6. All right, and then 8P2 at 12:15, you guys are going to go to lunch. All right, and then if you need a couple of minutes at lunch, that's okay, we can deal with that. 8P2 at 12:42, you'll go to period 7. So that's a little bit of a change. If you need to write that down, we'll go down to lunch and help you guys with that too. So just an FYI on that. Before we begin today and before I introduce our two guest speakers, I'm going to tell you a real quick story that emphasizes what you guys should be focused on today, and that's listening. So about 20 years ago, I had an opportunity to meet the head coaches and the coaching staff from the best baseball college in the country, Louisiana State University. They not only won the national championship, but they won it something like 3 times in a series of 4 years. They were really good. And as I'm listening to the coaches, they're talking about recruiting one of the best players in the country that year. He was a pitcher from Florida. He was the best pitcher in the country. And he had decided, and his father decided, that he was not going to turn or play college baseball. They had decided he was going to turn pro. The Detroit Tigers had the first pick that year. He wound up being picked by them a couple years later, but he knew he was going to make a lot of money. So when this college coach showed up and said, "I want you to come and play college baseball for me," his father told him this, and his father said, "Why should we come play for you if we can go make money playing pro ball?" And the coach just said one thing. He said, "I can make your son better. I've watched him pitch 3 times, which was the legal limit. He was allowed to watch him." And he said, "I can make him better." And they had a long conversation about how, and he showed him what would happen and all those kinds of things. Long story short, this player decided to go to Louisiana State University. During his freshman year, which is your first year in college, he didn't get any better. He was about average as a college pitcher. Now meanwhile, all through his freshman year, this head coach would walk up to him and say, "I want you to try this one little thing." Do you think he tried it? No. He was the best pitcher in the country as an 18-year-old, so in his mind, he didn't need to try anything. So he didn't try, and he never got better. About halfway through his sophomore year, which is your second year in college, the same thing happened. But finally, the player listened to the coach. He tried the one little thing that his coach suggested to him, and he went from throwing 90 miles an hour in about 10 minutes to throwing 95 miles an hour. At the end of his sophomore year, he was drafted again by the Detroit Tigers. He was signed for $5 million more per year than he was offered as an 18-year-old coming out of high school. The funny part of the story is, though, a couple innings after his coach had told him and talked him into trying that one little thing, the player walked up to the coach and he said, "Coach, I can't believe you didn't tell me this over a year ago when I first came here." He goes, "I can't believe how good I am now today and how much better. This is the best I've ever thrown the ball, the best I've ever pitched." And his coach turned to him and he said, "I did, you just didn't listen." And as I'm listening to the coaching staff, this is the next thing is out of their mouths was this. The moral of the story is that sometime today, someone is going to say something to you that will change your life. The question is not whether it will happen. The question is whether or not you'll be paying attention. See, as 13 and 14-year-olds, you might listen to a principal. You might even listen to a teacher. Some of you, maybe not so good at listening to your parents anymore. How many of you have younger siblings? Some of you may not pay attention to that younger sibling. When they give you words of wisdom, are you really paying attention, or are you locked in on what they're saying? So I'm going to ask you to do me a favor today. I'm going to ask you to listen with such a focused intensity that any distraction around you goes away. No matter what that person's doing, they can't break your concentration. And to help you with that, if you have anything on your lap right now, would you tuck it between your feet underneath your seat? Awesome. 8th graders. In a few very short weeks, we're going to start talking to you guys about the end of your year. And you guys, since the time you have entered our building, we told you guys when you came to tour the building as 5th graders, that when you came here, we didn't want you to be followers of the older kids. We talked to you guys about being leaders from the day you got here. And one of my biggest points of pride in this particular group is how well you guys have taken that message and lived it for 3 years. So today I'm going to ask you again to live that message by being the most focused and intense listener that you can. Because I guarantee you that our two speakers, Mr. John Robinson and Mr. Doug Hamlin, will do for you what they do for me. Every time I talk with them, they grow, shift, and change my perspective. So without any further ado, which means I'm done talking and I'm going to get out of the way, help me welcome Mr. John Robinson and Mr. Doug Hamlin.
All right, just FYI, we have some technical difficulties, so I don't know what's going to happen on the screen. Hopefully nothing bad. Sorry. Maybe something good. You never know. So we'll see how that goes. That's life, though, isn't it? My name is John Robinson. I'm proud to be here. I live right here in Glenmont, Del Mar, so we get the opportunity to speak all over the country, in some cases all over the world, so it's always nice to be home. There's a lot of familiar faces here in the audience, and so it gives me a chance to see some familiar people and maybe teach you a little bit about who I am and where we're coming from. I own a company called Our Ability, and Doug helps me run Our Ability. And with Our Ability, we mentor, connect, and inspire people with disabilities towards education and employment. I know that you hear this as students all the time, but when you grow up and become an adult, you will realize how important education is to employment, is to your life. And so one of the things that I never had as a person your age was a role model, a mentor with a physical disability that I could speak to. So that's what we do with Our Ability, and we're proud of that. I'm going to share with you some stories about some obstacles that I've had to overcome. Doug will share some stories with you about obstacles he's had to overcome. And at the end of this, I hope we're at a point that we can ask and answer questions with each other. Because the very best way we learn about ourselves is to ask questions around us and to listen to the answers. So I'm going to spend some time allowing you to ask us questions that either I address or I don't address, but you can ask anything that you want, and we'd be happy to answer it. Before I do any of that, I want to ask you all a question. How many of you looked in the mirror this morning before you left your house? Raise your hand. What were you looking for when you looked in the mirror this morning, just before you left the house? Anybody? Does your hair look right? You're rocking the hair right now. It's looking good. Good job. Your hair. How many of you will look to see if your hair is okay? Raise your hand. All right. What else? What else might you be looking for when you look in the mirror? Anybody? Teeth. I have toothpaste on my teeth. Do I have spinach from last night's dinner on my teeth? Right? Somebody's laughing. You had spinach, didn't you? Clothes. How many of you looked to check your clothes out before you left? Right? Just before you leave the house, just before you go out into the 8th grade world, Bethlehem world, New York State world, you go to the mirror one last time and you say, what's wrong with me? Don't you? You're making sure your hair's okay, your clothes are okay, your teeth are okay, whatever it is. Right before you leave the house, you take one last look and see what's wrong with me. But what if you ask your best friend, how do I look today? What are they going to say? Anybody? Right back there. Shout it out. What would they say? Good. Bad. All right. You need a new best friend. Your best friend is more times than not going to say, you look good, don't you? Why does your best friend say that?
He or she doesn't want you to feel bad.
They want you to feel bad? Why else? Don't be embarrassed, dude. Keep going. Why else?
They want to make you feel good.
They want to make you feel good, not feel bad. Why do they want to either make you feel good or not feel bad? What's your best friend do with you? They love you. Whether you want to admit it or not, you're smiling over here. No, your best friend loves you. Really, they do. Your best friend loves you for who you are, no matter what. Your best friend is truly your best friend. They don't care if you have spinach in your teeth. They don't care what your clothes look today. They don't care if your hair is on the right side or the wrong side of your head. Your best friend loves you for who you are. What if you started your day looking in the mirror that way? What if you started your day by saying, what does my best friend love about me? How much better would your day be if you start out by thinking what's good about yourself, not what's wrong with yourself? Why do I think that? For the longest time, I could not look at myself in the mirror. I was uncomfortable with how I looked on video, and I ran a video production company for a long time. I could not look at myself. But through a series of conversations with my best friends, I've realized, you know what? I am happy, comfortable, and content and blessed to be the person that I am today. And it's true. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. So I challenge you tomorrow morning. I want you to, yes, check the clothes, check the hair. But I really want you to ask yourself right before you leave the house, what does my best friend like about me? Put that in your head. And then go about your day. And what a dramatic difference that could make. Now, as I stand here, when I look in the mirror, what do I see now? Well, I'm a small business owner. I'm active here in Delmar, in my community, in my church, in my children's school and youth sports. I'm active in all of those things. I'm a graduate of Syracuse University. I graduated Syracuse University in 1990, and I loved going to Syracuse and studying there. I am also married. Andrea and I have been married for 21 years. And I'm proud of that relationship. And I share that with you because that's one of those questions you would ask. Did he find somebody? Did he find a girlfriend? Was there somebody out there for him? We have 3 children. We have a 25-year-old son. We have a 17-year-old daughter who's a senior in high school. And we have an 11-year-old son who's in 6th grade here. I'm blessed with 3 children. And that's, again, one of those questions that you may or may not want to ask me. But I'm opening that up to you. Because when I look at myself in the mirror now, I start to see what I have, not what I don't have. I am also, which is obvious to those of you that can see me, and I think most of you can see me right now, I'm a congenital amputee. A congenital quadruple amputee. Which means I was born without the extension of my arms and my legs. Born, as you see me, no elbow, no forearm, no hand, no wrist, no fingers. But I can tell you that I am blessed to have the sensation of what it would be like to have fingers. In my mind right now, I'm moving the muscles that would have turned into fingers if I had adapted like you did. So in my mind, I understand, because you can see I'm moving the muscles in the front row of what it would be like to have fingers. I wouldn't trade that for anything. I know what it feels like to point at you or make a fist or give the middle finger driving. I know what it's like. I don't give the middle finger driving all the time, but once in a while. I know what it would be like, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. The ends of my arms, I have these sort of 2 fatty tissues. This one's a lot bigger on my left arm, and there's a smaller one on my right. They would have turned into thumbs because I'm moving in my mind what a thumb is. And I didn't really ever think about it very much growing up, but I would use it. Well, freshman year in college, I arrive on campus at Syracuse University, and that first day, that first week, I meet my very best friends in life that I'll ever have. Godparents to our children. I'm sure we'll be friends, and we see each other all the time, even still now. Well, one of my best friends that I met, his name is Pat. Pat comes in, takes a look at me the first day I arrive on campus, knocks on my dorm room door, doesn't wait for me to say come in, opens the door, takes a look at me up and down, and walks out. Comes back 5 minutes later, doesn't knock on the door this time, walks right in and says, John, I'd really want to take a look at you. I'm like, all right, this is getting weird. He goes, I really want to see the thing on the end of your arm. And before I can say no, he comes walking right up to me and starts to grab this thing on the end of my arm. But he's now not grabbing it. He's poking it. He's folding it over. He's pinching it. He's seeing if it bleeds. He's trying to pull it off of me. Pat, what are you doing? By the way, nice to meet you. He goes, John, look at this thing. It feels like a marshmallow. I said, really? He goes, yeah, it's a marshmallow. So now he's fondling my marshmallow, okay? He then asks me a very serious question. He says, John, he goes, look at the marshmallow. Pat, I look at it every day, dude. He goes, no, look at this. There's scar tissue all the way around the marshmallow. I've seen TV shows about this. When did your parents have that surgically attached to you after you were born? What are you talking about? No, John, I've seen this. They reattach limbs. I know they do this, and I've watched you carry your car keys, open doors, and open books. I'm like, you're stalking me? When did your parents have that surgically attached to you? I have had this every day since I was born. I don't believe you, he said. Well, we lived together for 3.5 years, and now we're living with 8 guys, and it's college graduation 3.5 years later. And we're in a big house, and we have a party the night before college graduation, and we invite our parents and our brothers and sisters, and so there's 70, 80 people in the house. And we're all saying goodbye to each other because it's going to be the last time we're together. And my parents are there, and everybody's parents are there, and there's Pat, and he has my mom and dad cornered in the back corner. And I can't get there fast enough. And I hear him say, Mrs. Robinson, tell me the truth. When did you have the marshmallow surgically attached to John? My mom says, Pat, I'm going to tell you a secret. Don't you ever tell John this. We did have it surgically attached after he was born. I knew it, he said. And he comes running over and throws me to the ground and squeezes the marshmallow and is laughing. And I look up from the ground at my mother and I said, Mom, why on earth did you do that? She said, I had to. It was so much fun. He believes it. I was born with it. I was born with everything that you see. My legs are different altogether. They're the lower part of my leg, foot facing forward. Thank goodness I can walk. I can put on shoes. There are congenital amputees that are born where their feet are facing backwards, and so they have to be amputated at birth. Ankle, lower part of my leg, no knee, and no upper part. And if you see a skeleton in science class or an x-ray of yourself, you should know that your hip, ball, and joint fit snugly together. Mine do not. There's about a 2-inch gap from where my leg is to my hip area. And there's nothing holding it together. So that when I was a freshman in college and met Pat for the first time, I was 3 feet 11 inches tall. And as I stand here now, I'm under 3 feet 9 inches tall. And it's all because that bone is riding up into my leg. And it's created a very painful dynamic. But you know what? The truth of the matter is, I'm blessed at what I see in the mirror every day. I wouldn't trade what my best friends see about me now. I've learned to be comfortable with who I am and to share some of these stories with you. Now, before we go too much further, I'd like to introduce a good friend. His name is Doug Hamlin.
Morning, everybody. John asked a few minutes ago what you looked for in the mirror this morning when you looked in the mirror, and I can assure you I was not worried about how my hair looked. But I did, excuse me, I did look in the mirror this morning to make sure I looked okay before I came here, and then I said goodbye to my wife. I live about 3 hours away from here, and she said, good luck, have a great day, you look great. It was 5 o'clock this morning. I'm sure her eyes were closed. But she told me I look great. She would tell me that every day because she's my wife. So my story is a little bit different than John. I was not born using a wheelchair. I was actually injured later in life. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference, excuse me, that I went through that was kind of different than the way John grew up with his disability. I grew up in a little town about 2 hours west of here called Endicott, New York. And I was quite an athlete. I played 3 sports in high school. Diving on the swim team was probably the sport that I was best at, but I played baseball and soccer and a little bit of tennis as well. So I grew up kind of in an athletic frame of mind, and all my friends were athletes, and that was the group that I hung out with at school. I went to college right here in Albany at the university in 1978, so that gives you a little idea how old I am. And I graduated in 1982 and went right to grad school. And I was in graduate school when I got my first job. My first job was at a little company right here in Del Mar. They hired me in the spring of 1983, and just a few months later, in August of 1983, I was at a backyard party in Buffalo, New York. It was my sister's birthday. I was out there helping her celebrate her birthday, and there was a trampoline in the backyard. And I had done some work on trampolines as a diver in high school, and I thought I could show off and show everybody how great I was at this, and I was doing that. And got inverted. I was upside down, up in the air, which was not unusual. But I lost where I was, and I came straight down on my head in the middle of the trampoline and broke my neck in 3 places. And damaged my spinal cord. And you probably all are aware about how the body works, and the spinal cord is the cable that kind of processes the messages from the brain to the body and tells it what to do and what not to do. I knew the minute I hit that trampoline that my life had changed forever. It's funny how your mind sort of takes over and helps you adapt to a new situation almost immediately. And so while I was lying there, realizing now that my body wasn't working at all the way it should, I began preparing myself for what my life might look like in the future. And that life involved almost 6 months in the hospital, 3 months in Buffalo and 3 months here. In rehab and trying to get myself back in shape enough to get out of that hospital bed. Lying on your back in the hospital is not a fun place to be. I counted a lot of ceiling tiles and a lot of floor tiles, and realized somewhere in that period that I had to do 2 things. First of all, I was no longer the athlete that I thought I was, because I could hardly move my body, and I had to begin to ask people for help, which was incredibly difficult for me. I had never needed help doing anything physical, or, in this case, eating and dressing and brushing my teeth. I actually had to learn how to ask people for help. And I realized that people were there to help me. People not just because they worked in the hospital, but my friends came, my college friends came to visit me, and they couldn't wait to get me out of there and go have fun in a wheelchair somewhere, but they realized that I would need help doing that. So I learned how to ask for help, which was new to me, but also something that I realized I was reasonably good at, and I could get the things that I needed, provided I could explain the kind of help that I needed. The other thing I learned while I was in the hospital was that there was a lot of work to be done to improve my situation so that I could get out of that hospital bed into a wheelchair and back out into the world. And I realized about 6 or 8 weeks in that there was only one person that could do all that work, and that was me. And it was hard work, and it took a long time, but the realization about myself, John said he wouldn't trade things for the world, and neither would I. This terrible thing that happened to me made me learn more about myself probably than any other life experience. And the first thing it made me learn was I needed to do that work. So I did that work, and I got out of the hospital in April of 1984. I went back to work for the same company. Thankfully, they were able to offer me my job back. Ended up working for that company for 28 years and retired from there just a few years ago, at which time I met John Robinson. One of the things that I also had to learn about myself was that people began to look at me differently. Whether I'm getting in and out of my car, or getting on and off an airplane, or just rolling around an amusement park. It's really funny. If I'm rolling down like those big wide aisles at Disney or a place like that, somebody could be 100 yards away from me and begin dodging me to make sure they're not going to hit me because they might get hurt. It's really hysterical to watch. But people look at me differently, and I had to learn how to adapt to that. And what I realized I could do was help educate them. What they were really looking at was, gee, how is that guy's life different? And typically it's younger people even younger than you guys, and younger than the people we've talked to today, kids 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. They're just really interested in how different my life is and what kinds of things I need to do to adapt to that. So that's been a real pleasure of my life too, is taking those awkward moments and helping educate people on how I live my life and how I get done what I need to get done. I met John as I was winding down my career, and John convinced me of something that I didn't know, and that was that I had a disability. I didn't feel like I had a disability. I didn't live my life like I had a disability, but he told me, and I'm so glad he did, that I had a story to tell, because I had achieved some things that sometimes able-bodied people can't achieve. And it was exciting for me to understand that I had that story to tell. And so I hope we can tell that story over and over again. And I thank John for giving me that opportunity. And I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys here.
How many of you have something that's bothering you? Raise your hand. How many of you have obstacles that you have to overcome in your life? How many of you think you can't get through it sometimes? If you remember one thing from my talk, I hope it's this moment. Oftentimes, opportunities are disguised as challenges. So I'm going to challenge the educators in this room and the guidance counselors in this room to use that after this. Oftentimes, opportunities are disguised as challenges. When you look in the mirror tomorrow morning, you might be thinking about something that's an obstacle in your life. And I'm asking you to turn that around and see the challenge and the opportunity that that obstacle has. I've had a lifetime of doing it. If we can do it, anybody can do it. What are some of the obstacles that we've had to overcome, or I've had to overcome? It's as simple as standing here. Up until 7th grade, I wore artificial arms and legs. So I strapped on prosthetic arms and legs every day of my life. Couldn't stand up on my own, could walk, but if I fell over, couldn't get back up. Couldn't feed myself with artificial arms and legs, but decided life was better without it. As I'm standing here now, dressing, when I was your age, to go to the bathroom, I'd have to go to the principal and ask for help in the bathroom every day. How many of you would want to do that? By the way, the principal doesn't want to do that either. Right? As I stand here now, after I've had a lifetime of learning how to get dressed, it takes me 30 minutes to get dressed every morning, dressed the way I am. If I'm wearing a necktie, 45 minutes to get dressed. But you know what? Getting dressed every morning is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to prove to you that I can look a certain way, that I can have a certain job, that I can be a certain person. You see, I didn't want to sit at home and collect Social Security and not work and wear sweatpants, and that's all I had. I wanted something out of my life. Dressing has been an opportunity. Driving. I drive a Toyota Tacoma pickup truck. I love my pickup truck. I love watching you watch me get in and out of my pickup truck. You all do the same thing. How's he doing that? I have had some fun with it. Pull up to stoplights, unroll the windows, stick my arms out and say, "Look, no hands." You would be surprised how fast people get away from me. Driving is an opportunity. It's allowed me to get around, to be independent, to be able to go get my job. Driving allows all of us with disabilities, if we have the opportunity to do it, to be the equal of others, and it becomes very important. Another thing I want to talk to you a little bit about is, do you remember the first time you learned to ride a bicycle? Raise your hand. Was it being pushed by an older brother or sister? Maybe to see if you fell or not fell? Probably secretly hoping you fell. Was it a parent, mom or dad, running behind you, hoping you learned to pedal fast enough to keep going? You remember that first time, right? I remember the first time my 3 children rode their bike for the first time. You see, I couldn't ride a bicycle. All 3 times, Andrea taught our 3 children to ride a bike. I can remember sitting in the front lawn, watching Andrea teach all 3 kids how to ride a bike, realizing I'll never have this opportunity. And it bothered me. I didn't talk about it much. I put it aside, but it was there. Like all of us that have problems and things going on in their life, it's there. Had the opportunity to go to the Paralympics in London after the London Olympics in 2012, and I saw some great adaptive athletes, people that were competing against each other with disability and really wishing I had had that opportunity. You're lucky if you compete in athletics. I didn't have that opportunity. Went to London and came back and realized I wish I had had that chance. And my wife asked me to go to see an adaptive sports organization here in town. She had set up a meeting for me to go, and I didn't really want to go. I thought she wanted me to learn to ski. And I'm going to tell you a little secret right now. At 3 foot 9 inches tall, I'm afraid of heights. I was not going to get on a ski hill. I wasn't going to do it. But I went over to look at the equipment and be very kind. And there in the shed of this organization were 10 sit skis. And the woman asked, did I want to sit up on one? And I said, no. There was sleds for sled hockey, and there in the back of the shed was this 3-wheel recumbent hand cycle. And I'd seen somebody at the London Paralympics use this hand cycle. And before I knew what I was doing, I walked over to the hand cycle, jumped up into the seat, leaned back, and started to push that hand cycle out with my arms. Because that's what you do. Instead of pedaling with your feet, you're pushing with your arms. And before I know it, I'm out of that shed, into the driveway, pushing that hand cycle for the first time in my life, crying my eyes out, realizing I never thought I would ever do this. 3 years ago. I get there and get done, and the woman that runs the organization asked, would I like to take the hand cycle home and try it for a while? And I said, absolutely. Put it in the truck and get home and take it out of the truck. And put it out in front of our house. And before I know it, I am doing our 1-mile loop in our neighborhood. And before I know it, my 2 younger children are on either side of me, teaching me how to ride a bike. They are laughing their heads off. And I'm crying my eyes out, realizing I never thought I'd have this chance. And I get home, and my wife is there waiting for me. And my wife is there, you have to understand, she's pretty active. She's a marathon runner. She's a hiker. She's done half of the Adirondack, all of the Adirondack Mountains over 4,000 feet, and half of the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine. When I say she's active, she's active. And I get there, and I'm drenched with sweat and tired after doing the 1-mile loop. And there's Andrea with a big smile on her face, and she says, oh good, I have always wanted to take a little bike trip with you. I'm like, cool, yeah, maybe down by the river, and I'm thinking the 4-mile loop down by the Hudson River. I'm sure that I've just done 1 mile, I could probably work up to 4 miles. I say, yeah, let's do it. Dummy me. I should have realized as soon as I said, yeah, let's do it, she had something bigger in mind. She said, John, that's right, I've always wanted to do a little bike trip with you. And I said, what would you like to do? And she says, I've always wanted to do down by the river, yes. But I've always wanted to do the Erie Canal. I said, how long is that? I mean, what, you mean from Buffalo to Albany? It's like 220 miles to drive. Yeah, she says, no, it's 350 miles along the canal. Andrea, there's no way I'm doing 350 miles. She said, John, don't you tell everybody at the speeches you give they can overcome whatever obstacle that stands in your way. I said, you listen to me? She said, yeah. I said, Andrea, I'll do it under 2 conditions. 1, we do it as a family, and 2, that we do it and raise awareness for people with disabilities. And this is the end of 2012. And so on January 23rd in 2013, we are in Tonawanda, New York, after training for almost 9 months. And on January 23rd, 2013, we're ready to go and leave Tonawanda, New York. And I trained for 9 months by myself and then with Doug, because we set up an arrangement where we would have groups of people with disabilities at every stop along the way for those 17 days. I asked Doug to help me along the way, and that we were going to do it. And we got to Tonawanda, New York. We did our first day 22 miles. And at the end of the 22 miles, we got to Lockport, New York, and we had 16 days to go. And I was tired already. And the morning of day 2 became the turning point.
What John didn't tell you was that there was a very weak moment over breakfast that I decided to join John. I said, gee, that sounds like fun. I didn't know what I was getting into. But training together was probably one of the things that made John and I closer friends than we were. Riding alongside someone for 9 months is something that'll either make you friends or not friends, and luckily we became very good friends. So like John said, we began the ride, we got to the end of the first day, we found our hotel, we got up the second day, and I had already begun to realize that I was going to have a problem. I had the wrong equipment. The hand cycle that I have, or had at the time anyway, really wasn't designable for what we were about to put it through, and I sort of knew that at the end of the first day. And I also realized that I had undertrained. I simply wasn't ready physically to do the 300 and something miles that we were going to do. So we went through day 2, which was, what, John, 28 miles, something like that. And that realization became very apparent to me that I wasn't going to be able to finish either that day or really all of every day coming up. But I had 2 jobs. I had not only the requirement to ride next to John, which now was going to be troublesome for me, but I was also kind of his logistics man. John had a lot of speeches along the way. There were opportunities at night to meet with groups of people, including politicians and local business people. And it was my job to kind of make sure all of that was lined up so that when John arrived, the right people were in the right place, and we had a good event. So this particular night, we got to the hotel we were in. I wasn't able to finish the ride, and I had double booked John. I needed him in 2 places at 6 p.m., and neither party was interested in changing their schedule. So my wife shows up in the room, and she could tell I was just really angry. She said, because I was kind of yelling at myself and throwing things around. It's not pretty when I get angry. And she said, what's wrong with you? And I said, well, the first problem is the guy with no arms and no legs is beating me. That's a problem for me. I'm a competitive, athletic guy. And she said, Doug, you got to remember your legs don't work either. And I said, oh, yeah, sorry. So then I arranged John's speeches. We got that all taken care of. And it was at one of those speeches, and I don't know if we have the picture now, John, or not, but it was at an event in Rochester we were at. And I looked across the room, and there was a Paralympic athlete that John had met there giving a talk. And across the room there were 2 little guys that were probably 5, 6 years old in wheelchairs, clearly had probably affliction since they were born that had put them in wheelchairs. And I looked across the room at them and I said, you know what? This is not about me, and it's not about me not being able to do the ride, and it's not about me being a bad logistics guy for John. It's about providing those 2 guys with the opportunity that John and I have had. John and I are very, very fortunate men. We've had the opportunity to have good education, good business careers, and it's for those 2 little guys that we're really doing this Erie Canal ride. And that put the whole day and the whole ride in perspective for me. That's not to say I didn't train harder the next year and buy a new bike so I could beat the guy with no arms and no legs the next year. But it really was a great moment for me to realize we're really doing it for others, we're not doing it for ourselves.
At the end of day 2, we had 27 miles to go. It was 95 degrees, and we're on stone dust or dirt instead of asphalt now. And so I got to the end of day 2, and Doug had left me, and I'm with Doug's wife and our family, and I get there and I'm dehydrated, I'm out of water, I'm tired, I'm sore, even though I had done all this training. And we arrived at an event in downtown Albion, New York, and there at this event are 350 people with disabilities cheering us on when we got there. And that was the moment I knew that it wasn't about us, it was about all of these communities and all of the people with disabilities across New York State that have nothing to look forward to, that need some inspiration, that need something to cheer for. You see, we are all blessed in this room. Whether we have an ability or not an ability, whether we see an obstacle or an opportunity. We are all blessed at what we do see in the mirror every day, or who we are. And we need to see it. Because the moment I saw 350 people with disabilities, like myself, cheering us on, I realized no matter who you are in life, you have an ability to overcome anything. And so we finished day 2, and we finished the 17 days, and as we kept going along New York State, more and more people would join us. 200 people, 300 people, 400 people, and we got to Albany 17 days later in the summer of 2013, and we had a big event, and I thought I would be glad it was over, excited to be done, ready to get off the bike, but I was sad that we wouldn't see people along the way anymore. And we were starting to say our goodbyes, and we had no notion of doing this again. And a young man came up to me, 17 years of age, and asked if he could speak to me quietly and privately, and I said, absolutely. And he said, Mr. Robinson, when you and Mr. Hamlin do this in 2014, can I join you? I said, what? He goes, yeah, you're going to do this again, Mr. Robinson. I'd like to join you. So last year in 2014, we didn't do it in 17 days, we did it in 11 days. We were not going to be defeated at all. We did it in 11 days. We both bought brand new bikes. So there's Doug on his Batmobile bike, the nice, low, sleek black bike. I like that. It's about the coolest thing you've ever seen. And there I am in my orange bike for Syracuse University and having a great time. And here we are leaving Tonawanda, New York, ready to go this year. We knew what we were getting into this time, but we're doing it together. We couldn't do it without our 2 most important people in our lives, our wives. You see, every step along the way, while we're biking every mile, so are our wives. And they're also looking out for us and making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're also meeting groups of people with disabilities each and every way. And when I say 350, I mean 350 people with disabilities at each ARC. And it's wonderful to see it. The conditions were not perfect every day. If you think about 11 days in the summer, you get hot sun, you get rain. Well, when you get rain on a bike that's 3 inches off the ground, you get puddles. And when you ride right behind Doug with puddles, you get muddy. And you know what? That's okay. That's what we had to deal with. These are the 2 little boys that made it real for us in 2013. You see, their heroes aren't LeBron James or Tiger Woods or Sidney Crosby. Their heroes are Ryan Chalmers, who competed in London as a Paralympic athlete. They thanked us for what we're doing across New York State. They were proud to show off their wheels, their face paint, their reflective lights that they had in their wheels. They're proud to show that off. That's what it's about. You see, when they look in the mirror every morning, I'm sure for a few minutes they think about the wheelchair that they're in. They think about the no arms and no legs. They think about the hair out of place. They think about the test that they have to take today. They think about the boy or the girl that they like or that they don't like. What I want them to do is know. Take a look. See in that mirror what your best friend loves about you. Start your day realizing what you can do, not what you can't. The ability that you have, not the disability that you might have. Because if we can all look at the mirror, in the mirror, and see what we can do, we can accomplish so much more. Thank you very much for listening. I very much appreciate it.
Second, I'd ask you to tell them your first name before you say your question. If you're way in the back and the way in the front can't hear your question, They'll repeat it, so you don't have to scream and yell. Just try to project your voice. So who's got the first question?
Great, go ahead. Yep.
Can I still feel my legs? Yeah, I have what's called an incomplete injury, so there wasn't a transection or a cut in my spinal cord. It's incomplete, so certain messages get through. So I can actually feel in some spots on my legs hot and cold, or I can feel myself doing that. I can't, if I had a pin, it wouldn't hurt, but I know it would be there. So a little bit, I can feel my legs.
I'm Kate, and what's your favorite part of what you do, your job?
So my favorite part of our job is helping other people find jobs. You know, it took me 4 years to find my first job as a person with a disability. That's a long time after I graduated Syracuse University. There was enough discrimination against what I looked like, and quite frankly enough that I needed to overcome, to help other people with disabilities find jobs around the country is the most important thing we do. And we're proud to do it. And I wouldn't trade that. This is the fun, this is fun to meet you, but the most important thing is to help people find employment. Because without my job, without my education, I wouldn't have my employment. Without my employment, would I have had the courage to have the family that I have and all the great experiences that I've had because of that? I don't know. Life becomes a circle, and that employment and education is the engine for that circle that makes it move forward.
Next question. Right back there.
I'm
Sorry.
And I was wondering, what was the turning point to what you guys wanted to do this for? What did you do when you were younger? How did you decide what you wanted to do?
So I had a career working for a software company for many years. I got to fly all over the country. I've been to 49 states and 6 provinces, and I had a great job and a great experience. And that was my prior professional career. I met John on an airplane close to 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago now. And John was just beginning to form what has become Our Ability. And the turning point for me was when John told me, and I think I said it before, that I had a story to tell. And I listened to John tell his story. And I realized that there was so much power in helping educate not only rooms full of people like you guys, but we talked to professional organizations, we talked to other disability organizations, and watching their reaction and their revelations about what they can do with their own lives has really been kind of the long turning point for me, realizing that that's my second career. That's something that I can really spend some time doing.
So we've got time for one more question. John, folks, at our earlier presentation, our first question was whether or not John was bullied because of his appearance when he was in middle school or even younger. John, would you share with this group what your answer to that question was?
Yeah, if I were your age and somebody asked me if I were bullied, I would have said no. And I would be lying. Not easy to say it, is it? The truth of the matter is I was bullied, absolutely. I was picked on. I looked different. But I learned early on that if you're bullied, when I was picked on, I didn't stay with the people that were hurtful to me. I went with the people that loved me. It's again, looking in the mirror every morning. See what your best friend sees and go with who loves you. Start your day with what your best friend likes about you. When I was picked on, I got away from the people picking on me and went with the people that loved me. See that sign right there behind Doug is about hope? That's what I saw when someone was picking on me. You know what? I'm going to not be with you, but I'm going to be with you because you like who I am. It's harder today than when I was your age. There's electronic bullying, texting, Snapchat, Instagram, all of that stuff. Get away from those that don't see you for who you are. And go with the people that do love you. Tomorrow morning when you look in that mirror, I beg you, look at yourself for what your best friend sees and start your day with that positive energy. Thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it.
John and Doug have graciously agreed to come back on some Tuesday during your home base to answer more questions. Would you guys be interested in having them do that? Well, we'll set that up. We'll announce it in the morning after. 821 8M students, I'm going to ask you guys to hang tight for 1 minute because we've got to get 8P2 to lunch. 8P2, let's move quite soon.